when a person is by himself or herself with a flip card or just a question, they don't have to make a commitment. They can simply look up the right answer or look up an answer. There's no risk involved. And extensive work shows that making a commitment, expressing your decision through either a motor response with your hands or speaking your answer, helps you consolidate and retain the information that you're studying. So the motor response is really important. We require a person to press a button to indicate whether or not, yes, the two objects are the same, or no, the two objects are not the same.
Let me take you back a little bit. We're talking about a research design that focused on people's ability to recognize when a relationship was or was not applicable to a pair of objects. That's the sort of fundamental task?
Yes.
Do these two things have this relationship or not?
Yes.
And I think what you were saying is that if you ask them to determine whether two objects have that relationship, are in that relationship to each other or not, and you show them the two objects in succession, then one of the things that's required of them in order to make their judgment or determination about whether the relationship applies is they have to be able to recall the first image while they're perceiving the second image or shortly thereafter.
That's right.
Or that maybe they put both images in their mind or brain, somehow manipulate them, but they have to do something active with one of the images that's no longer in front of them.
That's right.
Okay, and now when you provide the two images simultaneously, then their challenge of determining whether the relationship applies to the two or not is not dependent on their ability to remember one or the other or both, because they're right there in front of them. So you've removed one of the potentially one of the skills or tasks that was part of the process, and so you can focus more clearly and directly on learning that relationship. Is that about right?
That's right.
Okay. And then to go back further, if you're talking about, instead of showing two objects and determining whether the person has figured out about whether they do or don't have the relationship that's being considered, if you're in a mode where there's one object, like a problem or a question, and that's all that's presented, I suppose, or one image, I guess, and then you ask them to respond about in some way, that you're almost necessarily asking them to respond at some greater level of complexity than merely determining whether two objects are in a particular relationship.
Well, you're depending more on memory.
And can you give me an example? I mean, we've talked a lot about flashcards where you have a problem on one side and the answer on the other side. But what's a different kind of example where there'd be like an image and there'd be some task they're supposed to do where they only see one image and now they have to do this task?
Well, an easy example is that of art history. If I simply show you a painting and say, who painted this? In all likelihood, unless you have that painting itself sitting around your house, you have only seen it a few times in your life, and you're going to have to recall or remember who painted it. In contrast, if I show you parts of two paintings or all of two paintings side by side and say, do you think the same person painted?
Oh.
Or did Van Gogh paint both of these? Or then that is a different problem.
Yeah, let's go back for just a second to the one painting. What you're getting at is, if I have to look at a painting and say, is that or is that not a painting by Van Gogh, I'm supposed to either remember that particular painting because I saw a picture of it or I saw the actual painting somewhere and someone said, hey, that's by Van Gogh or Van Gogh, depending on who you are.
Right.
On the other hand, it might be that I learned enough about his painting techniques, even though I never saw that particular painting before. I now have acquired sort of some strategies or features that I've learned are associated with his work. And when you show me that painting, I can say with relative confidence, I'll apply those things I learned and I'll say yes. Or I apply those things I learned and I say no. That would be another way of getting that question answered correctly or not based on a single image. But I think what we're trying to get at is either way, either you remember that that thing was associated with Van Gogh, or you know the things that you must do to analyze a painting. Either one of those requires much more complex cognitive activity than looking at a pair of the way you just described a minute ago and seeing and deciding those are by the same painter or not.
Or not, yes.
And even easier would be, are these the same paintings or not?
Yes.
Or are these excerpts, these what do you call it, clips out of these, are these two clips from the same painting or not?
Right. Or from the same movie. Or so, I mean, in one case, you're really, like you said, dependent entirely on a kind of reconstructive process. You're heavily dependent on memory. In the other, you're using the logic of comparison and contrast, looking at individual features. And the real beauty of that is that if the designer of the problem, the investigator or the teacher, chooses to, that person can take one attribute of the paintings and look at multiple examples of a painter and others who might have painted at the same time. And by looking at pairs and interrogating the student, you can really help the student focus on very specific features, whether it's composition or color or the use of the brush and so forth and so on. And that, to me, is a powerful device.
So to get back to one more time, because I think we're close to the heart of the matter. One way of using this 2x2x2 design is when we're interested in enabling someone to learn about a relationship that either does or does not apply to two particular items that can be presented as images. And so if something else that we're talking about learning is more complex, but it's possible to identify some portion of that more complex learning task, some portion into learning about how a particular kind of relationship does or doesn't apply between various pairs of objects. The 2x2x2 gives you a nice simple way to focus very narrowly on that feature only, that one kind of relationship within perhaps a more complex learning situation.
Right, right.
Or the other way you just said a minute ago, which is slightly different, is recognizing when an attribute applies to two images, whether the same, maybe I'm not saying this one as well. The attribute we were just talking about is painted by Van Gogh. And we were looking at two things and the person's trying to learn when that attribute does or doesn't apply. And I think I'm muddling this, but say a little more about why it's better to look at two than to look at one and say, was this painted by Van Gogh? Or to look at four and say...
Well, basically, it's a combination of simplicity on the one hand and focus on the other. So, for example, let's say one wanted to help the student appreciate the use of certain combinations of color, strong contrast, say, or certain kinds of the abstract use of sort of abstract images. Then you can take that feature, whether it's color or brush stroke, you can take that feature and show the student over and over again pairs that are from both, in which both are from the same painter, and pairs in which one is from one painter and the one is from another painter. And through repetition and through feedback, which is crucial, of course, you're showing and helping the student create an internal representation of what this painter did and did not do with his paintings, how he created a certain effect. And you can eliminate all the other aspects, the background, the location, the subject of the painting, and just focus on, say, pieces of the painting and look at the brush strokes or the color, the way figures are treated. Whatever it is, you can focus on those attributes in relative isolation and bring home through comparison and contrast between one painter and another, what features are indelibly and routinely associated with one versus the other that made those painters unique.